Hello, friends, and welcome to the Strangers in Common podcast. I hope this finds you well, and if you're not well, that's okay. I'm here for you. First off, I just want to say thank you to everyone that listened to the first episode and sent me messages and everything. It was much appreciated. So let's get to know someone that you don't. And today's person is Alissa. Alissa, introduce yourself.
My name is Alissa. I actually went to high school with Neil, and so we have like a 20 plus year deep friendship. And unfortunately for Neil, he's had to rescue me from a lot of weird situations. So like Neil, I grew up in Thornton, Colorado, and we went to high school together, but before that we did not. I went to a different elementary and middle school.
So, what was it like growing up for you?
Not great. My upbringing was full of really difficult abuse, and we grew up pretty poor, but my parents liked to live like we weren't poor.
Okay.
Like we never had like dental or anything like that care,
Right.
but my dad always had like a new Harley somehow, kind of thing. So,
Champagne taste on a caviar, or a caviar taste on a beer budget,
yeah.
right? Whatever the saying is, yeah.
Yep. Yeah, so, so that being said, all through high school, I kind of like went to extracurricular activities so that I didn't have to be home as much. After I graduated, I made a knee-jerk decision to get married so that I didn't have to live with my parents anymore.
Okay.
So I married a guy that we went to high school with, and he was joining the Navy. And so I moved away at the age of 18, married, and get to see like Washington State and Florida and everything in between. And, in that time I got my German Shepherd, so that was good. That was good.
So, if you want to talk about it, with the abuse in childhood, was it parents? Was it other relatives? What was it? If you want to elaborate on it.
Yeah, it was actually not. I mean, most of my family is pretty messed up in the way of abusive behavior, but mostly my dad, who was my stepdad, that I didn't find out until way later.
Okay.
So,
Right.
that was hard as a kid to like process all that. Like this man has been like beating me like I was a grown man, basically, and
So was it just physical, or was it like verbal, or just everything?
it was emotional, verbal. It was everything but sexual abuse.
Okay.
Thank God. But I mean,
Right.
um,
But that stuff still takes its toll, obviously.
yeah, he was just sinister, and he didn't like women, and he didn't like me because I was like not his kid. So, but I also was angry with my mom because later in life, because when I reflect back to it, I'm like, you never protected me. You didn't. So when we were in high school, you remember they had the eye care hotline.
Right.
Yeah. So they passed out these like little magnets, in the 90s, and they were like, if something's bothering you, you can call this line anonymously and report it, and to get it off your chest. So I do. And then the school counselor calls the house, and I pick up, back then we had the corded phones. My dad picks it up upstairs, I pick it up downstairs, and I'm listening. And the counselor tells him everything, because that establishment had called my counselor,
Right.
with concern. So then my parents made me go to school the next day and apologize for lying.
Oh.
So I learned pretty quick, like there was no trust to be had in adults. Like,
Right.
I'm on my own. So, but like as far as other people in the family, like my uncles were pretty shitty to me, for whatever reason. However, I feel like that probably was because I came out pretty early as gay. So they didn't like that. They were very like kind of backwards thinkers.
Well, and back then it wasn't widely as accepted as.
Yeah, it wasn't.
Right.
Yeah, I remember like my mom had a friend that her her husband were best friends with my mom and my dad, and they had to live with us for a short period of time. And the wife ended up having an affair with a woman, and my dad's friend, her husband, caught them, and he was like, "Well, are you gay or something?" And she goes, "Maybe." And it was just like this whole talk of the town. Like they were like, "That's disgusting."
Right.
And as a teenager, I remember just thinking, I don't know, what are you guys so upset about? Like, what the fuck does it matter, you know? And they just were like disgusted. They just kept using that word, like, it's disgusting.
Right.
And meanwhile, I had a girlfriend, like, secretly, you know? Like,
right.
I'm like, oh, okay, well, disgusting. So, anyway, I ended up coming out later, you know, and, yeah, it wasn't accepted very well. My mom said, I hope it's a phase.
Right.
My dad told my brother he kicked me out of the house, you know, and my little brother at the time was, I think, 12 or 13, something like that. And he told him to lock the door when I left, and I heard it as I walked away from the house. And I was like, okay. He would call me, like, a queer bitch kind of thing.
Yeah, which is not great for your mental health, obviously.
It wasn't great. And so, once again, you know, I'm on this, like, path of, like, oh, it's just me. I'm alone. I don't have any support. So I did that. I dated really toxic people, women that were just so fucking toxic.
So do you feel you were attracted to the toxic people because of your stepdad?
I feel like there is a, like, deeper dynamic than that even. Yes, I do, but also I dated much older women. So I think in combination, I was looking for, you know,
A parental figure almost?
yeah, like somebody to just kind of like guide me a little bit.
Right.
Unfortunately, I found people that were like way more on a maturity level, way below me, like way back behind me. And I just could never land somewhere, you know? And so yeah, my marriage obviously like dissolved, and that dissolved because my best friend that I grew up with came to visit me in Florida, and we had a birthday party for a friend of his, and it was back in the day of AOL chat, so I was chatting with my brother online.
Right.
And I got up from the computer and I walk out to the living room, and they were sleeping on my couch, butt naked, and I'm like, oh no, this is not. No.
Yeah, that'll definitely end a marriage.
Yes, it did. It kiboshed it pretty quick, but yeah.
So, you said you felt your mom didn't protect you.
Yeah, my mom was like this really, like, overly generous, like, sweet, kind woman of the community. Would do anything and everything for everybody, but her kids. I mean, she did the best she could, really, and she's still like one of the sweetest humans on earth, but she just dropped the ball as a parent. Like, she herself was abused by my dad. You know, like one Christmas he broke her nose. Like, she got so upset she threw the Christmas tree over the balcony.
Wow.
And this was their first like year of marriage, I think. Anyway, she called the police because he had broken her nose, and the police came because she had thrown the Christmas tree over the balcony. They made us leave. They made my mom leave. So she took me and went to my grandparents. And so that was the start of their marriage. But I was 3, so I thought that he was my dad.
Right.
Like, I had no idea. I didn't concept, like, I had 3 years with her without anybody. But
yeah, you don't usually remember those years.
Yeah, I didn't find out till I was like a teenager.
Right. So do you feel you weren't protected because she didn't have the capacity since she was trying to protect herself?
Yeah, probably an element to that is true. But also I feel like she was such a people pleaser that she would do anything to just keep him calm, keep the storm calm, keep him happy.
Gotcha. Because you guys were going to be there regardless, right?
Yeah. And so, like, I remember trying to tell her on different occasions, you know, like, this is happening, or like, he hit me or whatever. And she would just kind of like dismiss it or tell me that I was lying. Like, she read my journal one day and she's like, I don't want you to ever write these lies again about your dad. I'm like, okay, well, so yeah.
I'm sure it's easier to say you're lying than to accept something that's hard to process.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, and as I age, I try to like really step into her shoes more and see like that must have been hard, to have kids and like they had my brother, which was his kid and her kid, so they really treated him like I would say like he and I were raised by two different
Right.
parental figures,
Right.
Um, so yeah, I was definitely I was treated definitely like the black sheep.
And I get that. So,
Yeah,
when you're an outsider, then
yeah, yeah, and I didn't quite fit in anywhere really. Um,
so have you, since you've gotten older and you've reflected on it more, do you still feel your mom, or do you still hold it against your mom that she didn't protect you?
I hold a lot of resentment against my mom. I find it very difficult to go visit her, and I don't know. I'm working on and all that right now currently, but
Right.
yeah, I hold a lot of resentment because I'm just like more. I think oddly more I hold resentment for her against her because she never protected herself to begin with. Like she didn't have that kind of backbone
Right.
for her, and then subsequently like it spills over onto me, and it's now my responsibility.
Right.
But also my mom treated me like I was like a sounding board instead of a daughter, or I was like an adult my whole
Right.
childhood. I didn't get to play. My dad was the kind like if we went outside, we couldn't like laugh or make noise or scream or anything. Like we had to be silent. It was
Okay.
a real weird
It's kind of hard for a kid to do,
yeah.
but
So, those things, and my mom would be there and just wouldn't say anything, just be dismissive of it.
right.
So, I always thought, I just wish she would just get a backbone and put her foot down one time and just be like, you're not going to talk to her like that, or you're not going to, set that
Right.
kind of rule. It's ridiculous or whatever. But she never did. So she always, but if they fought, she'd come to me and try to like utilize me as her therapist maybe, and I was just a kid,
Right.
so I didn't
Because she
know.
didn't have anyone else to turn to,
Yeah, so I
basically.
was like, oh, I was just overburdened with like adult responsibilities, like I
Right.
was always trying to like make sure the boat wasn't rocked. So fast forward into my 40s, and I'm still learning how to unlearn that behavior of people pleasing. Like I don't need to take care of everybody. I don't
Right.
need to call it
Right.
because
That's definitely not an easy task.
yeah, and what happens when you try to do that really ultimately is that eventually you end up just sabotaging your life,
Yeah.
until you hit the bottom and you're just like, okay. And that is what happened to me.
Yeah. So what happened? What happened with you after your marriage ended?
So
Where did
after
you go from there?
after my marriage ended, uh we were in Florida, and I left him and I came back home because my mom had been sick. Not sick as in physical illness, but just having nervous breakdowns over nervous breakdown over, it's just like
Right.
continuously, like she developed an eating disorder and suicide attempts, and, and so again, I am running home and I'm going to fix everything. I'm going to move back and take care of my mom, and so, yeah, that's what I ended up doing for a couple years. I rented a house and I got involved in her therapy pretty heavily, and I just became very enmeshed in her care, and she took full advantage of that.
Right.
I did try to date a couple of men right after my divorce with Brandon, and it did not go well. It
Okay.
was awful, and I was like, well, you know, uh, I, you know, I had always been on both sides of the fence there.
Right.
As a kid, I would explore that. So I thought, well, I'm just gonna date women, and so I did for like 20 something years. Yeah, but like I said, I just got into these really tumultuous situations that, living with women right away, women with kids or without, mostly women with a drinking problem or substance abuse of some sort.
So,
Um,
and I'm assuming you were using the same stuff they were.
oh yeah, yeah. Yeah, so at this point in my early 20s, I'm learning that I have a real addictive personality. Mainly because at this point in time, I start dating my boss, who
Where
is,
were you working?
I was working in a nursing home as a
Okay.
CNA, and she was my DON, director of nursing, and she came on to me, and she was 30 years older than me.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and so anyway, we move in together, and I ended up having a back surgery, pretty extensive back surgery. They had fused my lower back, and that was the first time I had been like introduced to any opiate medications,
Okay.
and it was coming to a close. I was starting to heal, and my meds were running out, but my girlfriend at the time was the DON, and she was in charge back then. They were kind of careless about destroying medication that went expired, or if a patient had moved out or passed away,
Right.
you destroy those medications, and the DON is in charge of that, her and her alone. So she was stealing all this opiate medication and bringing it home to me.
Oh, wow.
And so pretty soon, two pills every 4 hours was turning very quickly into 12 pills an hour, very quickly to 30 pills every couple hours. Like, it became a real problem real fast. And one day she came home and I was on the couch, kind of out of it, and she squats down and looks me in my face and she said, "You're despondent." And I'm like 20 years old, and I go, "I don't know what that means."
Right.
And she
goes, I'm 40 something. I don't know what that means. So
well, like I basically, like, I was just out of it.
Right.
I was not present in that moment. Like, I was pretty drugged up. And she said, "I'm taking you for a ride." I go, for a ride where?
Right.
And I was just like in La La Land. And she goes, "Let's go get something to eat." So she loads me up, and we start driving, and we're driving and driving. And I have no idea where we're going. I'm under the impression we're going to go get food. And we pull up into this building, and it was a rehab, and she had packed a bag for me and everything. And I was so angry.
I can imagine.
I was so angry, and I was so indignant about it because I was just young, and I just felt like that was very unjust and very unfair that she stole meds to give them to me. She got me all hooked and then drops me off at the hospital,
Right.
So anyway, I stay in a rehab for about 3 weeks, and I'm miserable. I'm not doing anything that they're asking me to do. I'm just in my room pouting and throwing a fit, basically, and my girlfriend would try to come and visit me every day, and I would just decline the visit. I don't want to see her. I don't want to see her.
Right.
So
well, yeah, you're angry. I mean, you
no,
don't want to see someone that took you there.
I felt so betrayed.
Right.
Like, I was like, "Are you serious?" But I mean, in retrospect, she probably did the right thing, but also did the wrong thing.
Right.
Stealing medication.
Well, yes, of course.
So, yeah. So I get out of rehab by attending one group session, because whatever you would call them, the tech, or
Right.
the staff there, he comes in my room and he says, "Listen, you want to go home, right?" And I'm like, "Well, yeah." And he goes, "You have to participate at least one group. You have to."
Right.
So I get up, and I'm like full of angst, and I'm just like, and they go around the room, and this girl next to me introduces herself and says she is a heroin addict, right? And then they go to me, and I roll my eyes, and I'm just like, well, at least I'm not a heroin addict. I only do prescription medication. Like,
right.
Real snobby, like real, like, wet behind the ears, young kid, like just chip on my shoulder, And the counselor says, "I'm going to interject, and I want to tell you that, in fact, you are a heroin addict. You prefer yours in pill form, but that's the only difference." So,
oh, okay, because they're both opiates. Is that
it leveled me. Yeah, it really took me down to like reality, and I was like, "Holy shit, he's right."
Right.
And like, here I am, just like judging everybody in the room, like, "Oh, you piece of shit. Oh, you gross." Like, I do pharmaceutical. Like, it was just so out of touch with reality, And I didn't really start to get honest with myself about it until I was probably inching up on 30. So one day I had taken a bunch of pills, and like normal, I had a really high tolerance, and it made me sick suddenly. Like, I was just in a full-on sweat. I was, nauseous, shaking. Like, I obviously was overdosed, myself.
Right.
And so I go to the bathroom. I'm sick. And the minute I feel a little better, I go and take more pills. And I thought to myself, okay, that was the day. Like, I have a huge fucking problem on my hands that
Right.
I'm not going to be able to shake this very easy, you know? Um, but besides opiates, like, I had experimented already with a bunch of street drugs with Brandon back in my marriage with
Okay.
him. And he introduced me to meth, and cocaine and things like that, you know?
Right.
Um, yeah, so I definitely have this huge addictive personality, you know, and I would say that starts with relationships, especially.
So after you got done with the opioids, what did you go to after that?
The opioid addiction, it was a problem for a very long time. I would say up until maybe less than 10 years ago. I ended up going to a pain clinic and getting on Suboxone. And the doctor at the time said, you know, I don't know how you're alive to tell me this story. Like, in the last week, you went to 2 doctors, you got a prescription for 300 Vicodin and also 300 Percocet.
Right.
And also your sister has been providing you fentanyl patches and Oxycontin. You know, like, I
Right.
was just consuming so much. And she was absolutely right. She's like, I don't know how you're sitting here telling me this story and not dead somewhere. And I'm like, I'm right. I'm like, that's why I'm here. I need some help. Like, I need
Right.
help. And she put me on the highest dose of Suboxone a person can be on, right out of the gate. And man, it was like a miracle drug. It saved my life from that, at least.
Right.
So after that, I remained pretty straight and narrow. And this was about 2014. My dad, well, so 2014, I'm sorry, I'm dialing that back, way back.
You're good.
In the middle of the opioid crisis here. In 2014, I was with a woman and she had 2 kids, and we were together for the better half of 10 years. And so I've raised her kids with her. We've got the whole house, the picket fence, the vacations, and like the perfect relationship. So I thought.
Right.
And one day she just looked at me one night. It was like around midnight. I was reading a book and she said, I need you to move out. And I closed my book and I was like, can I ask why? You know?
Right.
And she goes, no, the sooner the better. And so the next morning I went and got a U-Haul and I moved out. So that's happening. And then all of a sudden the very next month, so that's January, February, my German Shepherd falls ill, you know, and I
Right.
have to go and I get him, and she's like, he's been sick, because she kept him for me until I could find a place to be that was solid,
Right.
because he was an older dog at this point, like 14.
Yeah.
And I didn't want him to have to experience that kind of moving. And so she calls me and says that he has been sick through the night and into the morning. You need to come get your dog. I show up and he is like barely breathing. He's stuck to the floor, matted to the floor. He's just in poor shape.
Yeah.
And I pick him up. I take him to the vet. We end up having to put him down. Hardest day of my life, man.
I can imagine.
Like, honestly. And I'm like, what I learned that day was never to question the universe. Don't ever say, what else could go wrong?
Yeah, because everything will go wrong.
Something else is going to happen. I mean, it's like a challenge.
Right.
So, all right. So I went through this horrible breakup. Then my dog dies, right? And then, so February, March, April, my dad had developed skin cancer above his eyebrow, right?
Okay.
And so we take him in for a CAT scan, and they say he's got this tumor behind his eye, kind of pushing pressure, and it's invaded the ocular nerve, you know. And so it's a pretty big deal. Like, what happened is it ran into the nerve line of his eye, and it developed that big tumor.
Right.
So here I'm facing this situation where now my dad, my biggest abusive person in my life,
Right.
is ill and needs my help, you know. And so I'm living with them at the time, and I'm taking him to all his chemo and radiation, like, all week. I'm still working at the hospital in Aurora, like, I'm so busy.
Right.
And one morning it was snowing, and my dad gets up and he says, I think I need to go to the hospital. I've got this pain in my neck, and he had developed like some swelling, like they thought maybe he was getting tumors kind of everywhere.
Mm.
And he was supposed to, well, no, he had his surgery. So what they did was they removed his left eye and part of his skull.
Ooh.
Yeah.
Okay.
And so I had to do all the wound dressings and all that. But he was a cigarette smoker, so his vascular stuff wasn't healing right.
Right.
You know, because he was a smoker. And so he's got this pain in his neck, this morning, and he starts to throw up in the sink in the kitchen, and I'm like, okay, let's go. You can throw up in the car. Let's go.
Right.
So I go and I start the car, and he's just panicked. I've never seen my dad afraid of anything. He was always like the bully.
Right.
So to see him like humbled and weak and scared, secretly was kind of, felt. I mean, I hate to say it, but it felt a little bit empowering. Like, well, how does this feel?
Right.
So anyway, we get in the car. My mom is sitting behind him in the passenger seat. He's in the passenger seat, and I'm driving to the hospital. No sooner that we turn into the hospital to drive him around to the ER, he looked over at me and he said, I hope they see me quick because I just don't feel well. And he threw his head back, and he had the biggest heart attack sitting right next to me. And I just was like, I don't know what to do with this.
Right.
What do I do? And my mom's behind him and doesn't know what just happened. So I pull in and I said, run in there and tell them we need a bed to come out with a stretcher. Right. That he's in bad shape. I didn't want to tell her. And so I'm doing a sternal rub, and he comes to a little bit, and I'm like, fuck. They take him in. And just a few days before that, he and I went to the bank to notarize paperwork for him not to be resuscitated, because he had been, after his surgery, he had been intubated, and he remembers hearing everything, and that they had restrained him, and it freaked him out. He's like, I don't want to ever be in that situation again. Just let me die, basically. Yeah. And so here we are in this situation, right? My mom tells them, do everything you can. So they start CPR, they break ribs, they send him to a cath lab, and the whole thing. Right. So 3 days in the ICU, and he's on life support, and really just preserving from the life support. I mean, really, if you pull that plug, then he's going to go real quick, right? Yeah. And I start to discuss it with other family members, like my brother, and they were so mad at me. They were so mad. I went and got the paperwork, and I gave it to the doctor. I'm like, these are his wishes. Right. Let's end this, because he was suffering, like you could tell. Yeah. And as conflicting as that felt in me, I had to do the right thing. Like people deserve their wishes to be met in life. So, anyway, they take him off life support as suspected. He goes immediately. Right. And I know that you had discussed like your father passing away and how that affects, like, it's different when a parent dies. And I was trying to like relate to it, and I'm like, I don't know, like my experience was so different, you know? And everybody's is. So yours isn't going to be like mine. So I mean, I think that I tried to like really convince myself that I needed to be sad about it, but I couldn't be sad about it, you know?
And that's perfectly fine. I mean, when you're abused by somebody, it's hard to have sympathy for something happened to them.
And the thing that I was proud of myself for was that I had a lot of compassion for him, and I gave him the best care, you know, like while he needed my help. I did, you know, I was never like shitty to him. I was never like, you owe me an apology, nothing like that. You know, I just did what needed to be done. But in the end, you know, like I remember being at his funeral and just kind of feeling numb. Like I didn't cry. I just kind of sat there, and everybody was, you know, my family, they were like, oh, look at you, you're so insensitive. And, you know, right. I'm like, were you guys not there when, you know, right. You guys watched this my whole childhood. Like, you're shocked, you know? And so it felt kind of awful to feel that calloused, you know, towards a parent, because you feel conflicted. You're like, I should feel this way, and I have, you know, right. Here I'm feeling like really nothing. Like, oh, good. Well, let's move on. You know, I spent a lot of time trying to convince my mom, like, now your abusers are all gone. You know, like, let's live your life now. And she just was appalled at my statement to her. She's just like, how could you say that to me? You know, and I'm like, well, it was pretty soon after his death that I said it to her. Like, come on, let's
Well,
get this.
and some people aren't ready to hear that.
No, she was not.
When you're in that situation, unfortunately, you don't always see them as abusers. Right. You see them as loved ones, not somebody that's basically trashing you in your life. Well, so it's hard to be like, you need to move on from this because you don't see it that way.
And my resentment grew because I just was like, I don't understand why we can't just move on from this. Like, but I was trying to like project all my anger onto her. Like, come on, let's rile her up a little bit.
Right.
But what I was doing really was taking away like the last few years of their life together were really fantastic. Mm-hmm. He was really attentive to her. Like, he really was quite changed, in that way. And they went on trips, they went on vacations. He took her to the mountains if she wanted to go for a ride. Like, she loved driving in the mountains. Like, they went and explored places. And here I was like, well, fuck this guy,
Right.
And I was very much like dismissive of the last part of their marriage was so good. And that's what she was kind of holding on to. Like, everything was so good. It was going so well. What happened?
You want to remember the good times, not the bad.
For sure. Yeah. So, I ended up apologizing to her and, because what I did wasn't okay.
Right.
Just because I was full of anger. Well, at this point I had never had therapy ever. I'm just trying to navigate this water like the best I know how.
Right.
I've got all this crazy trauma behind me, and now I'm getting into all these adult relationships full of trauma, and I'm just angry. I'm just like pissed off.
So after all this happened, circling back, so what did you get into substance abuse wise after all of this stuff happened?
Well, I got into just about everything. Just about. I got back into methamphetamine. I got into ecstasy. I got into cocaine. I tried crack. Like, I was trying. I kind of went on this, like, out of control roller coaster ride, like, on purpose. It was just self-sabotage all the way.
That was so, just so you didn't want to feel anything, or you just didn't want to be here, period?
Both.
Okay.
Both. I was trying to really escape the whole thing.
Right.
And the more I tried to, like, brush it under the rug, like, the more that surfaced,
right.
It just kind of pop up, and I'm like, I don't want to deal with it. So then I dive into drugs. I never really got into drinking per se, but if I was dating somebody that was an alcoholic, I mean, like, full-on alcoholic,
right,
I always felt like my initial reaction to that is I need to get on that level to tolerate it. Like, if I'm sober and they're drinking, I'm never going to make it out alive here. So I'm going to just get on that level, basically.
So do you feel you pretty much took over or conformed to whoever you were with at the time? Like, you basically took over their personality and just became them?
100%. Yeah, for example, like, I dated somebody that, I mean, I was notoriously known for, like, hating football. I dogged on it. I made fun of it. Like, I was the girl that all the Bronco people hated, like,
right.
and likewise I did them too. But, but then I met this woman, and she was a huge football fan, and all of a sudden, I'm on social media like, yeah, go Cowboys.
Right.
Everybody's like, wait,
right.
What are you doing? And so I definitely noticed myself kind of morphing into, like, I never got to explore who I was or what I wanted, what my needs were, maybe. Like, where were my needs and where were they needing to be met? It was always about, like, what can I do for you? What do you like? I would gauge that and then just, like, kind of just follow the leader.
So do you think you got that from your mom being a people pleaser?
100%. 100%. And what really pisses me off is that I get so uptight about her behavior, and then I find myself doing it too.
Right.
Or at least I did. I think I'm much better now. But yeah, 100% I did do exactly what she did.
Yeah, that's tough. That's tough when you try to become somebody else, especially that you're not that person.
Yeah, and meanwhile, by the way, I just was miserable. I'm
Right.
like, well, this sucks. Like, I hate football, or um, like one woman lived up in the mountains, and it was pretty isolated, like 30 acres of land, beautiful property and everything, but it just wasn't something that I was just thriving and happy in.
Right.
I felt like it was lacking something, but yet, here I was just like forcing myself to fit into this mold,
Right.
doing everything that she did, and one day that's kind of when it broke open for me. But yeah, that gets into the Vicky story, so that we haven't even touched on yet.
That's a lot.
Yeah.
So we'll go about for 10 more minutes here, and then on our next one we can dive
Okay.
into Vicky and everything.
That's like a 45
what's
minute thing.
so to kind of lighten stuff up, what's something that you're passionate about?
Yeah, I was actually going to talk about that. So when I was a child, I had this really weird, like, melodic memory. I remember sitting in my grandmother's lap. My grandmother's from Italy, and she had this really pretty accent, and so I would sit on her lap, and she would sing me songs, and I'd watch her mouth move, like, phonetically, how she was pronouncing things, and here I'm 3 years old.
Right.
And then I would, like, repeat the song back to her, right? And I discovered that I really loved music and singing, and I got into elementary school. My teacher had recommended me to the Colorado Children's Chorale, which I knew nothing about because
Right.
I've been like sheltered as hell. So I go and I audition, and apparently it's a huge deal. Like, it's a big deal to be, recommended for this thing. And they said she's got perfect pitch, but she doesn't sing loud enough, and she's so shy. Like, she just won't speak up.
Right.
And so I didn't get in because I was too shy. And the reason that I was is, because I was
right.
in this like turmoil constantly. But so, going forward, like in high school, I joined choir, of course, and band, and learned all I could about music. But then when I was married and out of the state in Florida, I decided that I was bored and I wanted to just find like a group to join, like maybe a church choir or some sort of band or choir.
Right.
And it was before the day of the internet, really, and I had found a flyer with this barbershop quartet style all women's chorus.
Okay.
And I go to their practice and I watch them rehearse, and they said, well, if you'd like to, audition, you can. Like, they hand me a cassette tape with the alto part, and she goes, you get one shot. You get one shot at this, and then that's it. So take it for as long as you need it. Most of the girls, they'll take, a couple months, like really practice it. So I go back the next day and I know the part. I got it. And she's like, are you sure? I'm like, oh yeah, this is 500 women in the stand, right?
Right.
And so they pull down 3 people and pair us up in a quartet, and I get in. And then I learn that they're a world-renowned a cappella group.
Wow.
So that was cool. Yeah. So now I'm still doing that. I'm just trying to find my way.
Yeah. Hoping to sing on your own or with other people again?
I really want to start a band.
Yeah?
I don't know what kind of band. Maybe like I don't know, a Red Hot Chili Peppers cover band.
Oh, yeah?
Girl band.
Whatever works. I mean, if there's
probably
people listening that play music, they can reach out.
That'd be sweet.
Um,
Yeah, maybe an all-female. I don't know.
you sing on Smule, right?
I sing on Smule, yeah. And that's my comfort zone.
What's your name on it?
Itali.
Itali?
Yeah, Itali.
Itali?
It looks Itali, but it's Italy, yeah.
Okay.
But when everybody always repeats it back to me, Ali Itali, so.
A-L-Y? A-L-I?
Ali.
I-T-A-L-I.
Yep.
Yeah, so if anyone's listening, let's check her out.
That'd be sweet. I will sing with you there.
Oh, man. You can sing. I've heard you sing. You can sing. You definitely got to get out and do it.
Yeah.
Aside from apps.
I do.
And put yourself out there.
I do, yeah. I've made it a very bad habit to be in that comfort zone of like my own space.
All right.
And that's what I'm going to work on this year. That's my goal this year is to get, my current fiance. Right now, he knows several of his friends are in big local bands here in Colorado, and They're amazing people. Like, I love them so much. And so I'm being more exposed to, like, really the better side of life at this point.
Good.
Thank
Have you
God.
have you looked into open mic nights or anything?
No. That's a that's a very scary
No,
thought.
because I don't want to put myself out there.
I do. Maybe we can go together.
Maybe,
If
yeah.
you'll take me,
That's
yeah.
fine.
I mean, you saw my one live performance. I
It's
don't know.
okay. It was good.
It was.
It was good.
You're so nice.
So we'll stop there for this one.
Okay.
And then on the next session, we'll get into what you alluded to with
The juicy
a
stuff.
pretty bad relationship that you went through,
Yeah,
and
but really, it's the
probably
most,
one of your most turbulent times that you've dealt with.
yeah, it's
So-
a story to be told, man.
All right. So hopefully with that, we all have a little more in common. And until next time, be safe and don't be a stranger.